Good afternoon. I'm with Bob Moriarty of 321 Gold. Bob, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. We had snow yesterday, but we have nice warm temperatures today. So the snow is gone, which must mean winter is over. Why are you snickering?
Well, it's November 23rd and all the holiday adornments are present, everywhere I go. So it feels like it's just getting started.
I'll tell you what's scary to me. Um, in October, the local store, hardware store here, started selling Christmas crap. So I had to put up with 2 months of it.
Bob, yesterday was November 22nd, the 62nd anniversary of the JFK assassination. And, one of the common themes in our conversations over the last decade and some of your other conversations with other people has always been your mistrust of government and, going back to your service in the Vietnam War and the U.S. Military, and how that war was started for fraudulent reasons. I mean, frankly, the Gulf of Tonkin thing was a CIA operation. That's pretty well acknowledged now by pretty much everybody, except for
Well, here's the deal. Let me stop you right there. It was not suggested that it was a CIA operation. It was a CIA operation. The whole thing, Turner Joy and the Maddox were two U.S. destroyers that were escorting a flotilla of South Vietnamese PT boats to attack a North Vietnamese PT installation. So it's not as if we believe it. It's not as if it's suggested. It absolutely was CIA. And strange enough, I've come to the conclusion in the 55 or so years since I was in Vietnam that the CIA played a far bigger role in the operation of the war. Okay, we read all about, we got to see what the Army was doing, we got to see what the Navy was doing, we got to see what the Marine Corps was doing. But what was totally hidden, and we're only learning about now, was how many dirty deeds the CIA was doing. And strange enough, they're doing exactly the same thing today in Venezuela. And it's going to have exactly the same result.
So that's interesting because that's where I was going to go with this. I don't want to rehash the whole JFK Vietnam War thing, but just to add some details to set the stage for what's next. Anybody who's studied the JFK assassination in great detail, the Vietnam War in great detail, how the Vietnam War got started going back to the 40s and 50s, and then you had Lyndon Baines Johnson was actually the president who got us into the Vietnam War. A lot of historians fraudulently blame JFK for it, but the reality is JFK, the day he died, was on the brink of getting the U.S. out of Vietnam. And at the time he was murdered, maybe we had a couple thousand, advisors in Vietnam, and we had some CIA guys there, but it wasn't a big presence of Americans there yet. But within a couple of years of his death, suddenly there were over 100,000 Americans. And then, with LBJ in 68, it got up to 500,000 at the peak, right? So really, Vietnam was LBJ's war. And LBJ was the orchestrator and the culprit who really led the cover-up of the JFK assassination, and that's very clear. Now, he had a lot of help from the FBI, the CIA to cover it up. Even the mafia. Probably a couple of the shooters were mafia shooters, but this was all orchestrated by the deep state at the highest levels of the government. And the only way you could possibly cover up murdering a sitting U.S. president was the cover up was done by the next president. That's really the only way you could possibly get away with it, because any president who asks hard questions and really tries to get to the truth would have gotten to the truth. But LBJ didn't want to get to the truth because it led back to him, right? So my question is, with what we know about that period of history, the 60s, and probably Martin Luther King was also killed by the CIA or some deep state. Robert Kennedy also probably, an assassination, maybe by LBJ too in his final year of the presidency. And now today, like, what are the deep state plots that are going on right now?
Well, here's what's scary, and we're doing this at noon on Sunday, and unfortunately, if I had to give you a paragraph on every pie the CIA has their fingers in, we could be doing this interview through Thursday afternoon. It's scary to me because the CIA is big in Yukon. They're big in Iran. They're big in Syria. They're big in Lebanon. They're big in Gaza. To the extent that when I was a kid and I saw Kennedy the night before he was killed, when I was a kid, we trusted the government. Okay. When you see Kash Patel and Blondie talking about the Epstein thing, I'm going, God, I mean, how can it be a mystery? Trump has fought that for months after claiming for years that the right thing to do was to expose it. And when they finally vote, and all of the Senate and all of the House, save one representative, voted to expose the Epstein files. And I thought something's wrong here. And then I realized that all Blondie have to do is classify some of the information as an ongoing investigation, and they wouldn't release it. Now, I've said something that's very important for people to understand. There is no way in hell they will ever expose the reality of what Epstein and the hundreds of criminals who were raping 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. They will never expose them because it was a CIA, FBI, Mossad intelligence operation, and it would be a revolution tomorrow if the American people understood how dirty the FBI and the CIA are.
Yeah, I'm going in this conversation to Venezuela and the Epstein files. So, it's interesting how the JFK assassination was covered up, because they did this Warren Report farce where they got these senators and judges and CIA folks, essentially, including the former head of the CIA,
who hated Kennedy because Kennedy fired him.
Yeah, he hated Kennedy. To the depth of his soul, he hated Kennedy. And by the way, Lyndon Johnson also hated Kennedy. Even though he was Kennedy's vice president, he hated Kennedy, and he hated Kennedy's brother. So there were a lot of actors who hated Kennedy at that point in time, who felt that their livelihoods were at risk, and he was going to mess things up.
Hang on. While that's true, you've left something out. Of all of the possible perpetrators in that conspiracy, who was the only person who was in the car directly behind J.F.K, who ducked down just as the car turned in front of the Texas School Book Depository? There is a very famous picture that shows the Kennedy car and then the car behind him, and the person who is in the back seat of the car ducked down to the floor.
Yeah, that was LBJ.
Oh, gee, I wonder if he had anything to do with it.
Yeah, he knew what was coming. They had planned it for months, and the night before he met with some of the key actors involved in it, and he knew it was coming. But it's interesting because these cover-ups, in the Kennedy assassination, the cover-up has lasted for 60 years, and it's gone to the very highest levels of the government to not allow these CIA files, these top secret confidential files about Cuba, about some of these actors like Jack Ruby, or even Oswald, who was not a saint himself. He was a deep state operator, but he was a patsy. Like the deep state set him up. And so
hang on.
So going to the Epstein files, how are they going to cover this up? Because now you have the House, the Senate, and the president signed it. The will to get this thing out to see the light of the day is overwhelming. But somehow we know they're going to cover it up. So my question is, how are they going to cover it up?
Well, here's what they do. They give you so much meaningless information that it confuses you. There are some key elements to the Kennedy assassination that if you take them all by themselves, you realize what was really going on. For LBJ to duck down when his limousine turned the corner in front of the depository means he knew something. So my question to you is, who did Lee Harvey Oswald make his last telephone call to before he was murdered?
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. So he was in the Dallas jail on Saturday afternoon, November 23rd. And he made a phone call to who he thought was his CIA handler in North Carolina.
Wait a minute. You mean Oswald was part of the deep state?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah, he was recruited in his probably when he was 19 or 20, just when he joined the Corps. And he was at a U-2 spy base, and they recruited him there. And they recruited a lot of young guys, at that time, at that same base. And then somehow he made his way to the Soviet Union when no American could possibly have gotten into the Soviet Union in 1959. He managed to get there, even though he had literally no money. He managed to get the plane tickets to go to the Soviet Union. He stayed in Finland for 5 nights in a 5-star hotel, and nobody knows where the money came from. But somehow he did it, and he lived in the Soviet Union for 2.5 years in Minsk. And This is at a time when there were no Americans. So somehow he managed to do all this. This guy managed to do all this. So obviously he had the fingerprints of intelligence all over him. And the KGB allowed him in just to see what was going to happen. It was a spy game. And they did this. This was back and forth at the time. During the Cold War, both sides played the spy game. They allowed the spies to come in so they could watch them. And then sometimes they would kill them or, make them go back home. Or they would turn them into double ops, right? They would turn them against their home country. But Oswald was obviously a CIA asset. He wasn't an agent, but he was an asset. And then they used him as a patsy to cover up the actual truth of the JFK assassination.
Of course, but here's what's beautiful, and this does go back to what's going on now in Venezuela. There's so much information about 9/11 that was obviously right from the very beginning. The odds against that happening were astronomical. Urban moving systems was a Mossad front operation with a moving company based in New Jersey. And they had moving vans driving around that area that had pictures of the Twin Towers and an American airplane, flying by the Twin Towers. And of course, it didn't mean anything prior to 9/11. As soon as 9/11 took place, you went, gee, I wonder if they were trying to send a message. And of course, the JFK Commission and the 9/11 Commission, same thing, total cover up, run by people who had a vested interest in shutting it up. And it's amazing to me now, we live in a different world. So I'll ask you kind of a trick question. This so-called drug cartel in Venezuela, who invented that name?
The name cartel?
No, they've got a Spanish name for the group they're calling the drug cartel.
The cartel of the sun.
Okay. Who came up with that name?
I don't know.
The CIA. And it's totally fake, and there was no such organization. And anyone who's ever lived in Florida or in the Caribbean knows the biggest drug country is Mexico and Colombia and Ecuador and Bolivia, and Venezuela is strictly small potatoes. So the idea that you're going to end the drug problem by putting sanctions on Venezuela is absolutely absurd. Now, what Trump doesn't understand, he didn't learn in Ukraine, was it's okay for you to go swap some tiny country like Somalia or Sudan or Gaza. But if you start fighting someone who is your military equal, you got a problem. And both the Chinese and the Russians have supplied Venezuela with weapon systems. And frankly, the Chinese and Russian weapon systems are far superior to anything the United States has. And Venezuela could easily be a bridge too far for Trump, because it could be a defeat so quickly. We got 15,000 troops. When I was in the Marine Corps, we had, I'm trying to think what the number was. We had something like 100,000 Marines in Vietnam. There were 548,000 people total, and I think about 100,000 of them were Marines. Vietnam was a bigger war for the Marine Corps than World War II was. Okay, we had more killed, more casualties, and more people in uniform. So 15,000 people, that isn't even a full division. Okay, there isn't very much we could do. Now, the CIA just blew up a refinery down there. They can have all these pain in the ass operations, but Venezuela has the largest civilian/militia armed, and the United States is not going to win a war. We can kill a lot of Venezuelans, but we cannot defeat Venezuela.
Okay, I'm gonna disagree with you here. Okay, pretty strongly. I would say that if Trump actually wants to do this, which I'm still not sure he's fully on board with, because I think he will look to the future and say, where does this lead to, and how do we install a government here that will actually work and last? And he won't get a good answer unless he's just being surrounded by the sycophants who will lie to him. But I mean, he may not be the brightest guy, but he's not an idiot. He's going to say, this isn't going to go anywhere. But if the U.S. military wants to take out Venezuela, Bob, it'll be done in 2 weeks. You're China, Russian.
Wait a minute.
That's just nonsense.
I'm not talking about
their weapon systems.
I'm not
They're
talking about taking them out. I'm talking about defeating them. Okay.
defeating them will be
How
it'll
many
be a
people were?
decapitation strike at the top, taking out the
Hang
generals,
on,
the leader.
hang on. The 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 Israelis are 10 times better at assassination and decapitation than the United States is. And what was the effect of their decapitation strike on Iran?
Well, I would say Iran is a much stronger, adversary than Venezuela, Bob.
Yeah, but it was an incredibly effective decapitation, and all it did was piss off the Iranians. Okay. Israel went through 12 days of hell and was begging for a ceasefire because they were getting their ass kicked.
Okay,
And
but let's get back to the crux of the question, because I'm
okay,
not going
but
to
the
argue
crux of the
about.
question, no, hang on. The crux of the question is, can you defeat them? Can you get them to change their mind? Can you get them to come around to your way of thinking? Or can you kill them? How many people died? How many people died in Vietnam?
Over 2 million in total.
What do most Americans say?
58,000.
Okay, I said people. You answered people. Now, the 58,000 is Americans, because Americans are taught to believe America is everything and American lives are valuable, but Vietnamese lives are not valuable. And in fact, there were 2 million directly killed in Vietnam, and there was another million or so killed in Cambodia as a result. We could kill 1 million people in Venezuela in 2 weeks, and it wouldn't change anything.
But the reality, Bob, is that most of the Venezuelan people would embrace a regime change. Okay, that's the reality. They want a better economy. Now, I know a lot of Venezuelans, and
why is there a bad economy?
Because the government is corrupt and steals from the people.
How about sanctions?
Yeah, but it's a corrupt. I mean, any sensible person can look at the Venezuelan government and the election process and say this is a corrupt state. Okay, it's almost like Russia.
Can you say
so
that
corrupt.
about the United States?
The U.S. is corrupt in a different way. I would say every country is corrupt, in its own way.
Yeah,
every
of course.
country. Yeah.
Of course. So don't tell me they're corrupt. I don't give a shit if they're corrupt.
But
I am an equal opportunity anarchist. I despise all governments equally. Governments are never the solution. Governments are always the problem. Now, to the extent is Venezuelan government corrupt? Yeah, of course. Do the sanctions have far more to do with the economic reality of the people? Yeah, absolutely. How long have we had sanctions against Cuba?
Oh, since what, 1960?
1959.
Okay, yeah.
What did it accomplish?
Pretty much nothing.
Thank you. Okay, so why do we have sanctions against Brazil? Why do we have sanctions against Venezuela? Why do we have sanctions against China? Why do we have sanctions against Russia? Why do we have sanctions against India? Why do we have sanctions against Venezuela if they don't accomplish anything? And the answer is because we're the United States and we do it for the same reason a dog goes into the middle of the road to lick its dick.
It's to be morally superior, Bob. But let's get back to the crux here, okay? Because I'm not going to argue about what the outcome would be or how many people would die, because honestly, neither of us know. But what is the Trump administration actually thinking here with Venezuela? What is the deep state, Marco Rubio's goal here? What are they really trying to get?
Well, that depends on what day of the week it is. Okay, today is Sunday. So today we want regime change. Tomorrow we want the oil. Tuesday we want to withdraw. Wednesday we want more sanctions. Thursday we're going to invade. So pick your day.
So they
Okay,
don't.
let me
But I mean,
prove to you-
obviously, there's somebody high up in the military, somebody high up in the CIA says this is a key objective of U.S. foreign policy. We have to take Venezuela and make it want to be like us.
They'll never be that corrupt. Let me prove to you. Give me a mathematical number, first of all. How much military experience do you have compared to how much military experience I have?
You have to always bring this up in every conversation.
Well, no, it's a factor because I'm going to prove to you that someone in the military understands through facts and logic something that hasn't occurred to you yet.
Okay, why don't you just tell me?
Okay. Why did Trump fly to Key West last week?
I didn't even know he flew to Key West.
Of course, because it's not in the mainstream media. Donald Trump flew to Key West because he wanted to see radar proof that the Russians have installed over the horizon radar in Venezuela that can track airplanes from 300 kilometers away. And the amazing thing is, and as a military guy, I'll tell you it's really weird. They're not tracking the airplane. They're not sending radar against the hull of the aircraft. They're actually tracking the disturbance of the air, which is nothing short of remarkable. Now, if you could see an aircraft at 300 kilometers, can you shoot it down?
I would think so, but how do they, distinguish between a hurricane or a storm and a plane?
Through radar.
Just because the air is, moving faster or something?
Yeah, you can track it. You can track the movement. What I'm saying is, and this is absolutely hidden, if you look at the performance of the top equipment of the Germans and the top equipment of the French and the top equipment of the English and the top equipment of the Americans in actual combat against a similar foe, I was an F-4 pilot when I was 20. I will tell you the F-35 program is the biggest piece of shit airplane ever designed, and it is a $3 trillion boondoggle that doesn't work. And we just sold a bunch of Saudi Arabians. Why are we in Venezuela? Because we like to fight wars. Why is Russia in Venezuela? Because they like to win wars. And there is a big difference. And if we invade Venezuela, we just bit off something far bigger than we can actually chew. And to the extent that I'm against war in general, because it's the last solution, it's never the first solution, it solves virtually nothing. World War I destroyed 3 empires. Okay? That's absolutely amazing. Okay? So what are we going to win in Venezuela? Well, we can kill a lot of people. We're good at that. We killed tens of thousands or millions of people in the Middle East on behalf of Israel. Are we better off? I don't think so. We're bankrupt. Okay, we had talked about this off camera before we got started. Something really bad is happening financially. Okay, we're going to see chaos in literally the coming days. Okay, and worst case, coming months. For us to declare Venezuela is the enemy and we need to do something about it, that's like swatting mosquitoes with a shotgun. You can do it if you feel like it.
Well, okay, let's put a bow tie on this, and then we can talk about the financial situation. It's clear there's the messaging is focused on this cartel of the sun and the regime's top, leaders, the generals, the president, et cetera, et cetera. This is not about the Venezuelan people. They're very clear on the messaging. But I'll say this: if Trump actually does this, if there is a big military operation, bombing, sending in special forces, or God forbid, ground troops into Venezuela, it will just be the final confirmation. The U.S. never, ever learns its lessons about meddling in foreign countries and starting foreign wars. And Trump is a hypocrite to the bottom of his soul, because he talks about he's the peace president. If he attacks Venezuela, he's not a peace president. If he forces, the Ukrainians to take an atrocious peace deal with Russia, he's not a peace president. So I'll wait on the judgment to see what happens. But it sure seems to me you put a carrier battle group in the Caribbean, which is not something that we do, and you deploy 16,000 troops to the theater. They've got all these, cruisers and stuff all ready to shoot the tomahawks. It sure seems like they're getting ready to do something big, kind of like Russia was getting ready at the end of 2021. So we'll table that to another date in the future, and hopefully it won't actually happen.
Hang on. I need to explain one simple concept to you. Do you understand the difference between ham and eggs?
I hope so.
Okay, it's the difference between being involved and being committed. Now, the chicken, she's involved, but the pig, he's committed. Okay,
it's a good one.
We have started this stupid operation that has no end goals in sight, and I happen to be very prejudiced. Rubio, it's a Chihuahua. Okay, he's got a very loud bark, and if he bites you on the ankle, okay, it's gonna hurt. But that's it. He's a Chihuahua. We have these ass kissers surrounding Trump because that's what he insists on. Some of the weapons that they brought in there are so inappropriate for any kind of a war that you can envision against Venezuela. The carrier is the largest warship in the world. But what exactly are you going to do with it? Okay, are you going to send 3 or 4 squadrons of aircraft to bomb the crap out of Caracas? What are you going to do with B-52s? What are you going to do with the fucking submarine? Okay.
Well, they can fire tomahawks from the submarine, right?
Against the cartel.
Yeah.
That the CIA made up.
You said they have all this high-tech radar, so that's going to be the first target. They're going to take out all the radars, and then they're going to have full aerial dominance, which is what we always do, which we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, and yeah, it's going to be the same script as previously, Bob. But
it will be. Who won Afghanistan?
The goat herders with AK-47s.
Some of the most amazing pictures I've ever seen tell the story if you pay the attention to the story. There is a group in the Middle East that has been amazingly effective at combat. And when I tell you who the group is, you're going to agree with me. But who would it be? Of all the dozen or so people in the Middle East who are in conflict on either side, Who's the most effective?
The Kurds have been pretty effective.
Well, let me give you a hint. I'll give you a little bit more information. They managed to shut down the most important port in Israel.
Oh, yeah, the Yemeni people. Yeah.
Exactly. And
The
strange enough,
Houthis, yeah.
they're not even a country per se. Okay. They're a rebellious group. They have been incredibly effective. And I have seen pictures of these, they're wearing a thing around their head and sandals and thinking, damn, I'm sure glad I never had to go up
Yeah,
against
they
them.
don't wear any
Those are
body
some,
armor. They don't wear any tactical gear. They're just with the assault rifle with the clips and
they are tough. Okay. And the amazing thing is, it's the poorest country in the world, and they managed to defeat Israel. Now, that's absolutely amazing, but it's asymmetric warfare. I'm going to tell you, all the Russians have to do is shoot down 2 or 3 B-52s, okay, and the war's over.
well, I hope that day doesn't come, Bob, where a B-52 is shot down in Venezuela, because I would fear what the next move would be after that, quite frankly. But let's go to Bitcoin, and this is a topic that we've talked about. What? This is a topic we've talked about many times.
Right.
You've been right before, you've been wrong before. It's been a long road since I think our first Bitcoin conversation was 2017. Well, Bitcoin in the last few months has put in a major topping pattern on the charts. We call this a broadening top in technical analysis world. It peaked in early October at 126,300. And I could say, based upon the definition of a bear market, Bitcoin is now in a bear market, a confirmed bear market. Look, it's getting a lot of headlines the last week, a lot of fear. So maybe it can bounce back a little bit here in the next week or two, but it doesn't look good overall. And the Bitcoin Jesus, Michael Saylor, was on the cover of Forbes earlier in the year, and I wrote about it in my weekly article on my Substack, Goldfinger Capital, which I invite everybody to check out. And that Forbes piece, Bob, I don't know if you read it, but that is one of the most telling or most memorable top signals I think I've ever read in my life.
I have to totally agree. And I read the short clip that was in the piece that you sent to me. And I thought this is absolutely brilliant, because in a couple of paragraphs, they absolutely point out both the problem and the solution. And I have listened to Saylor speak, and frankly, the guy's a goof. Okay, he's trying to be a guru. He's trying to be a prophet, and all he's doing is pitching a product that is 98% speculation and 2% utility. Now, what is the biggest difference between Bitcoin and Beanie Babies?
Well, Bitcoin, you need a password. There's encryption. There's a blockchain. It's
Nope.
It's it's digital.
Well, strange enough, that's part of it. At the end of the day, when Beanie Babies crashed, you had a wonderful little 79-cent toy that you could give to your dog to play with. Because Bitcoin is digital, you don't even have a 79-cent toy for your dog to play with, but it's going to end up in the same rat hole.
So I was thinking about Bitcoin, yesterday as I was writing my article, and I was reading the Forbes piece on Michael Saylor, which everybody's got to read that. I mean, they're talking about how he's going to this 5-star restaurant that he owns in Miami, and everybody's kissing his ass, and and they're asking for his autograph and to take pictures with him. And they say, here, Bitcoin is God and Saylor is its prophet. And oh man, you read that, you're like, this is a bubble. Like, this is classic signs of a bubble. So I went back to your favorite book, The Madness of Crowds, from Mackey in the 1840s, 180-year-old book, which is still a timeless classic. And I reread the section on the South Seas bubble and all the promoters of the South Seas bubble and how everybody in England got caught up in this bubble. And I said, holy shit, including the Bank of England, Bob, the Bank of England. And what's happening with Bitcoin today in the US government?
Who was the head of the British Treasury?
I forget his name.
The smartest man that ever was raised in England, Sir Isaac Newton.
No,
and what happened
way.
to him
Really?
financially? Of course. Sir Isaac Newton got caught up in that and lost his fortune.
Okay, yeah. All right, yeah. I remember that. Okay, yeah. So that's part of the South Seas bubble. So you had the Bank of England got involved later on trying to save the whole thing because they were under so much pressure. Sir Isaac Newton, the smartest man in the world at the time, got caught up into it and lost his fortune. And it swallowed up the whole country. It was such a bubble that everybody was speculating on this thing.
That I always appreciate it when I do an interview if the person doing the interviews recommends my books on Amazon. And I've got 3 books that made it to the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. However, you should not recommend my books. You should recommend Extraordinary Popular Delusions and The Madness of Crowds. If you are a serious investor and you have not read that book, you are not a serious investor. You have to understand how stupid people are before you can ever make money. And if you understand how stupid people are, you understand all you have to do is do the opposite. And you're absolutely correct. I mean, Forbes nailed the top, and they may have taken Saylor and put him on a crucifix and nailed his hands and feet to the thing because they crucified him and they didn't even understand it. That which is popular is always wrong. You've got to do the opposite. If you want to invest, you invest against the crowd, not with the crowd.
Yeah, to put a bow tie on the Bitcoin thing, look, I think it could go up in the near term, but it's probably going a lot lower longer term and over time. I don't have any Bitcoin. I don't have any MicroStrategy. In fact, I don't have any crypto right now. I've dabbled it in the past, but for those who don't understand what's kind of happening here, the fact that the new administration in the US has adopted Bitcoin and crypto and stable coins is what they believe will help them to weaken the dollar, which is one of their key objectives, and fund the treasury through the stable coins, buying treasuries. It created what, for all intents and purposes, was a bubble in 2025. And now, with all the leverage that built up, because everybody was speculating, well, if the president, supports this, if the government wants Bitcoin to go higher, then I'm gonna gamble my money on it, and I'm gonna borrow margin to bet on Bitcoin, to bet on all these cryptocurrencies, right? And now all that leverage is being unwound in the last few weeks, and maybe there's still more to come. And all that speculation and euphoria is being unwound. and you just don't know how far it has to go to the downside. I mean, quite frankly, as a technical guy who studies charts for a living, the Bitcoin chart is pretty ominous here. Like I said, it could have a near-term rebound, but I think it's probably going down to 70 or 60,000 over the next few months, and then we'll see what happens. And the fact that this micro strategy, this is Saylor's company, was able to raise money through hedge funds and other investors at a premium to the Bitcoin value of his company's holdings for so long. They raised all this money through the convertible debt. That was insane, in itself, because why would you pay double or triple for the Bitcoin that's held in MicroStrategy as opposed to just buying the Bitcoin for yourself for 100 cents on the dollar? If you bought it through strategy, you're paying 200 cents on the dollar, 250 cents on the dollar. Now, all that excess speculation is being unwound, and his company stands to just be a Bitcoin closed-end fund. And anybody who understands the stock market knows that, historically, closed-end funds trade at a discount to net asset value, not a premium to net asset value. And if his company strategy trades at a discount to net asset value, suddenly its purpose for existing is greatly reduced, and probably the trading volumes will drop off. The cost of capital for future raises will go up. And so the emperor is being shown to have no clothes.
Well, here's what it's important to understand about that we haven't talked about. What has been the greatest source of cheap money for the last 20 years?
The Fed?
No. If you were a hedge fund and you wanted to borrow $500 million, where did you get it?
The Japanese, the yen, the yen carry trade.
Japanese carry trade. And what just happened to the Japanese carry trade? The source of all this free money for the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, so Japanese government bond yields have been rising a lot.
No. Exploding higher. And the Japanese carry trade is now a reverse carry trade. If you go back to October 31st, the repo market blew up, and that was a symptom of a lack of liquidity. Now, last Friday, SoftBank, the biggest hedge fund in the world, lost 10% of its value in 30 minutes. It's a $186 billion fund. There is stuff going on below the surface, okay? And all this stuff, it's all interconnected, okay? If the Japanese carry trade blows up, then SoftBank blows up, and if SoftBank bank blows up, NVIDIA blows up, and if NVIDIA blows up, then Bitcoin blows up. It's all connected, okay? We are going to see a crash far worse than that of 2008, far worse than that of 2000, and far worse than that of 1929, because we have an economic system that is built on a foundation of quicksand. There is no other possible alternatives. It has to crash because it's simply not possible. During the shutdown, the 45 or 46 days the U.S. government was closed down, the debt increased over $600 billion. Now, how the fuck do you go into debt when your business is closed? And the answer is Trump has figured out how to do it. The $38.2 trillion debt in the United States is never going to get paid back. And when people wake up to that fact, then they're going to go, oh, shit. Now, we need to talk, and I never got to where you were right about the tax loss silly season. We need to talk about what can investors expect now, and what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks. And frankly, the tax loss silly season is going to be a tremendous opportunity. We are in a correction. I called the correction. I called the top in silver. I called the top in gold to the day. We are in a correction. The correction is not over. There's some very dangerous things going on. If you look at the GDXJ and the GDX and the XAU, those have all tumbled. And I've seen a lot of stocks down 20 or 30%. That's probably going to continue through the end of December. And I think there's going to be a great opportunity for investors who are cashed up. And one of the things I said, I did an interview with Frank Holmes on Friday. That was the high in gold and silver. And I said people need to get liquid and they need to take some money off the table. In the next 6 weeks to 2 months, you're going to have the opportunity to put that in. When the market crashes, what goes down?
Everything.
Everything. Okay. So you can talk about there's no silver and they're never going to make silver ever again. And every bank in the world is writing checks to buy more gold, and the world is going to end, and you've got to go to gold and silver. Gold and silver are going to go down. They're going to go down because people are going to sell it for the same reason that proverbial dog goes into the middle of the road, because he can.
Let's talk about tax loss silly season. So
I thought I just did.
no, we need to talk about it in more detail, Bob, because you said 4 to 6 weeks. So 6 weeks would bring us into January. So I think it's probably more like 4 weeks is the window.
Tax loss silly season is 4 weeks. I believe the correction could go into January, but that's a very small, meaningless point.
Okay. So I agree with you. We're in a consolidation phase, I would say, in precious metals and in junior miners. And some juniors have been hit pretty hard the last couple months, dropping as much as 50% from their highs. But also you have to realize when stocks go up 300 or 400% in a few months, of course, they can give back, half of the gains in a short period of time. That's the nature of the sector. So for those who have some dry powder, some cash available, how would you advise them to strategize over the next few weeks as we really get into the teeth of tax law season?
I'm really glad you said that, because that gives me an opportunity to pitch my book, Nobody Knows Anything, which is kind of a knockoff of Extraordinary Popular Delusions, The Madness Crowds. And I try to convince people to be contrarians. How did I know on April 25th of 2011 that silver was at the top?
Because everybody was bullish on silver.
If you went to the Sprott Silver ETF, the PSLV, it was selling at a 25% premium. Okay, you had to pay 60 some bucks an ounce for silver for the shares. Okay, you could go down to your coin store and buy silver for 50 bucks an ounce, but if you buy PSLV, you had to pay 25% premium. Likewise, when silver hit a bottom in March of 2020, how did I know it was at a bottom?
PSLV was trading at a big discount, 10% or something.
9% discount. Okay. Spot silver got just below 12 bucks an ounce, but PSLV was selling at a 9% discount. You could buy silver through the Sprott Silver ETF for 11 bucks an ounce. So what did silver do between March of 2020 and August of 2020?
It went up almost 3 times.
It went up 150%, went to $30 an ounce. A correction is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. They're easy to call if you are contrarian. I called the top and I called the bottom, and I made money in both areas. And you are far better technically than I am, because I'm not smart enough to do the stuff you do, but I am smart enough to know how to measure people. Looking at the discount or the premium of the spot silver ETF gives you an enormous amount of information if you understand you want to be a contrarian. So I think there is going to be an incredible opportunity, but it's going to be an incredible opportunity only because we're going to see a crash like nobody has ever seen in literally 80 years. What happened to the Dow between July of 1932 and June of 1933?
I want to say it went up
150%. Between September of 1929 and July of 1932, it went down 89%. Anything that you see that is real that goes down 85 to 95% will rebound 150%. It's an easy investment. You only see it every few years, but if you're a contrarian, and you have to be a contrarian, you can make money like you never dreamed before. I believe that Bitcoin and the 17,000 knockoffs are going to go to zero. The EU is talking about eliminating cryptocurrencies in 2 or 3 years. And should they do that, that obviously will be the kiss of death. But in real world terms, silver, gold, oil, stock market, there's going to be some terrible, terrible danger, terrible losses. But if you're a contrarian, there will be some tremendous opportunities.
Bob, I want to ask you about gold sentiment, investor sentiment on gold. Gold essentially more than doubled in price from early 2024 right. to just about 5 weeks ago when it hit 43.90. That's an impressive move. That's a very impressive move. Since topping at 43.90 in October, gold has had a correction of about 10% thereabouts. Yet, from my observation, investor sentiment has gotten far worse than what I would expect from just a 10% decline. What's your take on investor sentiment in gold right now?
Strange enough, what you just said is 100% accurate. People got so buoyant because gold is going up day after day after day. But as a contrarian, any market that goes up 9 weeks in a row is begging on their knees for a correction. So we had a correction and everybody panicked. Now, what I see, and it's just my opinion, is that if I'm correct about a major crash, and if I'm correct about SoftBank's going to go up and down, Bitcoin's going to go down, Dow's going to go down, S&P's going to go down, gold and silver are going to go down, there will be a tremendous opportunity. The sentiment suggests the correction could be over, but it's not convincing. Now, the sentiment at the very high, near 4,400 for gold, which frankly I find very expensive, only got up to 89% on the DXY. We have not seen a top in either gold or silver. We have seen an intermediate top. Did you watch the interview with Frank Giustra? Because he said something that I've said in the past, and frankly, Frank Giustra has about 1,000 times more credibility than I do. But he and I agree on this. Did you see what he said about gold at $5,000 to $10,000?
Yes, I actually wrote about it and published the interview. Yeah, that I think that was the best interview Frank Giustra has ever done. Yeah, he said, all these people that want $10,000 gold, I don't really want to live in a world with $10,000 gold. You got to be careful what you wish for.
Absolutely. Now, if you want $10,000 gold, what you don't understand is you're also voting for $40 a gallon gasoline.
Maybe. I think some could argue against that. That it's
I can
different.
prove it. I can prove it.
Okay.
How much has gold gone up in 100 years? What is the multiple?
Over 100 times. I think 120 times.
How about 215 times?
250. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. How much was gold in 1925?
$20 an ounce.
20 and 66 cents. $20
20 and
66
cents. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So if you multiply it by 215 times, okay, you come up with 43.90. Now then, what was gasoline
in 1925?
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess it was something like 50 cents, but I don't know.
19 cents.
19 cents. Okay.
Okay. So if gold going up 215 times is appropriate, why hasn't gasoline gone up 50 times, 100 times, 200 times?
Because oil is a lot more abundant than gold is.
I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you a number that's going to knock you over. There is a year in the production of gold when half the gold ever produced has been produced after that year. What was that year?
Man, that's a good one, Bob. You come up with these tough questions. I want to say it was a long time ago, like 1600 or something.
About 1965.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. The use of cyanide with no-seum gold in Nevada has been an incredibly efficient way to produce gold from deposits that were never considered economic before. The whole Carlin Trend has been an incredible producer of gold. Half the gold ever produced has been produced in the last 60 years.
But then let me flip it on you.
Okay.
How about the fiat currency?
Well,
how much fiat currency has been produced in the last 30 or 40 years?
Well, Trump has doubled it in the last 2 weeks.
So I get your point about gold mining is becoming more efficient and the numbers are getting bigger, but the amount of currency printing and debt out there is far outpacing gold mining. I can tell you that.
Well, strange enough, and let me tell you why this is true. And I've got a doctor here that I'm very close to and close to his family. There are 2 doctors that are married. One of them is a kidney doctor. I saw him a year or so ago for a problem I had. We went out to lunch on Saturday, and he's got 4 children that vary in age from 9 to 18 years old. And these are the nicest kids in the world. These are really serious kids. And because I am so concerned with SoftBank, with Bitcoin, with the price of gold, with Venezuela, with all this crap, I got into geopolitical stuff that 18-year-old kids are not used to hearing. And he wrote me a nice email today and said the kids were absolutely fascinated and they want to learn more. We know there's problems in France, there's problems in Germany, there's problems in the UK. Tanzania has just murdered a couple of thousand people who were protesting at the results of an election where the president of the country got 98% of the vote. Okay, there's stuff going on that people don't understand. It's really scary. And it's time to educate people.
Final topic, Bob. I'm going to name 5 junior mining stocks. Say whatever you like about them. Trident Resources in Saskatchewan, Dolly, Varden, silver in the Golden Triangle, white gold in the Yukon, or Sitka gold also in the Yukon, or Banyan gold in the Yukon. Do you have any comments on those?
Okay, let's take them one at a time. Trident. Trident came out with extraordinary results. The stock shot up and then it dropped back down. It is an absolute gimme. They are going to come up. They have some more holes to release. They are going to be extraordinary results. And Trident is one I have a stink bid in. I hope they get creamed. Because if
What's
they
a
get
stink
creamed,
bid? Is that like, are you at like $1 or $1.10 or what's a stink
now
bid?
$1.30.
Okay.
I missed it by 2 cents a week ago, and I missed it by 4 cents on Friday.
Okay.
But at $1.30 a share, I love that stock, and I own a lot of shares. Excellent company. Okay, next company,
White gold.
White Gold. White Gold had 2 major investors. One of them has sold their shares. They're in the Yukon. They're in one of the best areas there. They have lots of gold, and the message is not clear to the market. Now, I will say, and you're responsible for a lot of this, so you've got to take the blame. You brought so much attention to the Tombstone Gold Belt, primarily by supporting Banyan and Sitka and Snowline, that everybody's paying attention to them and nobody's paying attention to white gold. White gold is absolutely going to be a mine. It's absolutely going to go into production, and they're absolutely cheap. Now, Snowline, Sitka, Banyan, all great companies, will have more results coming out shortly. Have you heard anything about the bidding process for Eagle?
I guess it's going to be finalized in the new year, and most likely, what I'm hearing is a mid-tier miner is going to get it. So it's probably not going to be a senior. It's probably going to be a mid-tier, like somebody with like a 3 or 4 billion market cap.
Okay, because strange enough, that is. I'm trying to think of a nice non-offensive word, and it's really hard because I was a Marine. That has been the sticking point, the burr in the saddle that stopped Banyan from getting the attention they should have gotten. Banyan's got a great deposit at $4,000 gold. You can go in your backyard with a shovel and make money. Okay, people don't even understand how important that is. Banyan will be in production. I love Tara Christie. She's just wonderful. Sitka will have more results. They've done an extraordinary job. Snowline keeps hitting new highs. They have a great deposit. Rackla will probably come out with the results next week, and I am hoping I get down on my knees every night and I talk to my buddy upstairs.
It's funny with Rackla because you put yourself out there on that one, and it was looking good for a while, and then it slammed back down.
Here's what's funny. Name any company that you've ever followed that hit on the first 3 holes.
I can name a couple.
On the first 3?
Yeah, Hercules Metals, the first deep drill hole to test the chargeability anomaly hit. So that one was an exception. And
Newfound gold.
Newfound gold. West
Okay.
Haven, it wasn't the first hole, but it might have been within the first 5 that they
Yeah.
made the discovery.
It,
Bob,
it's actually
yeah,
very rare.
it's
But
very rare.
you mentioned one other company that
Dolly
has
Varden
been
Silver.
okay. Why have they been misnamed?
Dolly Varden Silver. Well, I mean, it's silver and gold. They have silver and gold.
They're going to change their name. Okay. And literally, I'm going to take some of the credit for that because when they came out with their last assay results, which were extraordinary gold results, I said, you guys got to change your name. You know, you're talking about Dolly Varden Silver. You're actually more of a gold company now than a silver company. And again, I am a firm believer in buying things when they're cheap and selling them when they're expensive. And relative to gold, silver is very cheap, even at $50 an ounce. Now, do I believe it's going to get cheaper? Yeah, I do. And I've got a distinct bid in silver. But silver's cheap. Dolly Varden is a great project. They picked up the gold asset, so they are now a gold silver company. And I believe they're going to change their name to Dolly Varden Silver and Gold.
And by the way, Dolly Varden Silver is on the NYSE now. So it has a real exchange symbol in the US, which makes it a lot more accessible to American investors. Bob, I want to point out one thing before we wrap it up. The white gold chart, I just happened to, notice this being a chart guy. White gold shares went from 25 cents in May to $1.46 at the beginning of October, and have since pulled back to 85 cents. I mean, that's the low of last week. It closed on Friday at 88 cents. But if you do the math, 25 to 146 back to 85, you'll quickly note that it's a 50% retracement of the rally. Exactly 50% retracement. Just pointing that out, being a chart nerd, it would be kind of fitting if the 85 cents was the actual low for this drawdown that it's had. And investors just have to know, if a stock goes up 5x in a few months, you can pretty much expect a 50% drop at some point in the near future.
Strange enough, and that is true of everything. I don't care how good a stock is. The best stocks I've ever seen dropped 50% 2 or 3 times before they went into production. So I am not a anti-correction person. I am a pro-correction person. If you want to make some money, put a stink bid on white gold. If you
Bob,
get an execution, you're stealing.
Very good. Very good. Good closing words. Thank you for your time, Bob. This was a very wide-ranging and exhaustive conversation. Cheers.
Okay, cheers, and enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.